Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome back to Siraat Al-Ghuraba, Path of the Strangers, the strangest podcast in the world. My name is Hudayfa. I am joined with my two beautiful, Al Mubarak, two beautiful co hosts, Brother Zahid and Brother Abdullah, the slave of Allah. How are you, brother, doing
Assalamu
today?
alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. It's good to have you, brothers. So, topic of discussion today is might be a heavy hitter. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but so let me introduce it a little bit. I was actually just earlier today after I spoke with you guys. I was scrolling on Instagram on some post, and I saw, it was the post was, I guess, pro khilafa, pro Islamic, Islamic governance, and as a comment on the post, it was like, um, it seemed like some troll, but it was like something along the lines of, this is impossible. You guys are delusional for calling for this, and I wish I screenshotted it. I should have sent it to you guys. And there was like back and forth between some brothers. It seemed, and it got me thinking because I'm sure you guys have heard this before, and especially with current current situation in Syria and the world right now. I was listening to Dr. Shadi Al Masri's podcast. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him, with the brother talks, the the goat aid worker. um, I found out some really interesting things about that guy. He's not just an aid worker, dude. He also sometimes picks up for himself. I'm not gonna. You guys can listen to the podcast for more on that.
Wow.
They were discussing, and Dr. Shadi, he mentioned, like, you know, what do you expect? Or I think Talks mentioned, like, hey, some you have to be super naive if you don't think some deals were made under the table with the West to allow this revolution to allow allow the rebels to take power. And he was like, Dr. Shadi was like, I mean, you're hearing this from the world, that you're hearing it from the world that they want to establish Islam. And Dr. Shadi goes, I mean, that you and I'm sure you guys have seen Julani and the parliament of the current government of Syria. The statements they're making are not exactly fully pro-Islamic as what we would consider. And Dr. Shadi goes, I mean, can you blame them? I mean, if imagine you declare khilafa, and imagine what the West would do to you, in terms of like physical assault, right? So he's like, can you blame them? And then he sort of went into the critique, like, people who call for something like this, you're quote unquote delusional, and you don't know the reality. You don't you're just you just sit on your phones and in your comfort in the West, and you make these bold claims without understanding the situation. So
That's
it
what
got
the
me
Dr. Shadi said. That's what Dr. Shadi said.
along the lines of that. Yes, no, he didn't say the last part about you sit in the Western, but it was going along that sentiment. And I'm sure you guys have heard this before, where it's like you want to make a pro-Islam, you want to take a pro-Islamic stance on something, and you're called I'm not saying like you're called extremist or anything, which people call you, but you're called delusional, and you're called like, hey, you're not going to see a khilafah in our lifetime. Don't even worry about it. Focus on yourself and focus on your locality. um and it got me thinking. I was like, am I delusional? What do you guys think? Abdullah, you seem a bit curious about this. What do you think, Abdullah?
Yeah. First of all, just want to define what exactly. So, the context behind, like the what you're mentioning is that obviously there's a lot of evidences that point to the new government in Syria that obviously is they're speaking with the Western powers, and they're kind of going on the same international stage and trying to gain their trust and vie for them. And as a Muslim, and seeing what's happening in Palestine, and seeing everything that the Western powers, the elite, the UN, all these organizations have done, I think Muslims, and we should be more skeptical about the world stage and how we're you know we're being treated it's obviously very hypocritical. And
What do you mean skeptical? Skeptical about what?
well, we have to be skeptical at what games are being played in against our favor, because we see how the life and the blood of, you know, the Arabs in general, but specifically the Muslims, is to the world. And the life of a Muslim, the blood of a Muslim, is worth very little. We've seen that over the past year with the genocide, right? So it's delusional in my opinion, it's very delusional to think that the governments that we see today, the democracy that we see today, will have any lasting benefit for the Muslims. And we see that they can't even stop what's happening in Gaza, right? And I might be kind of moving the subject in a different manner, but I think it's delusional to think that the Muslims will not face any issues. But it's also delusional to think that we should stay in our current position of we have no political authority within the world stage today. And I think that's something that we have to talk more about. Inshallah, we can discuss that in greater detail in the podcast today.
No. So here's the thing, Abdullah. I wanna comment on something you said. And after this, I want to go back to Hudayfa's point. But on your point of like democracy running the world, I don't think it's just a benefit for the Muslims, but even for non-Muslims. You see generations coming out from the 80s, from the 90s, growing up, even from the 70s, growing up, being faced with the system, being faced with knowing exactly what the secular capitalism means, to live under that for years, through generations, and what it does to families and what it does to their own family. So look, I think this solution, this alternative solution, Islam is, I think more than just Muslims are ready for it, and people are sick. Non-Muslims are sick of that capitalism system they've been living under. But I want to go back to Hudayfa's point a little bit. I think my take on that, look, man, a lot of people call out the word delusion, call you far-fetched, call you up in the sky, super delusional about thinking about a state like a Khilafah or a Muslim state. Or a Muslim entity for that being said. But the thing is, in my opinion, I think for the most part, most people don't even know what Khilafah is, right? The definition to define what a state or a Muslim entity is from the get-go, right? Obviously, it's easy to push off to call someone something fantastical when you don't know something, right? But for those Muslims saying that, and obviously this applies to Muslims and non-Muslims, but for the Muslims, saying, hey, whoever thinks in a Muslim entity, a unified Muslim entity, is delusional, doesn't know that, look, man, this khilafah, this state, is a part of your deen as much as it is part of mine, as much as tazkiyah, making dua, and khushu and salah and everything else is a part of your deen. And that's something, right, that's like changing kind of your world perspective on stuff, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, because it's not something you take in growing up, right, as you would other matters within Islam. But once you kind of get to, okay, khilafah is something from my deen, that, guess what, the Prophet himself spent his whole life within prophethood, when he achieved prophethood, to achieve. And then when you kind of understand it from that point of view, it's like, okay, it's that delusion starts, that fantasy, that dream starts to become a little bit more real. And then obviously people then go and, okay, look at the situation now, how are you going to go and bring that about? But those are kind of my thoughts.
So, okay, yes, people say, look at the situation, look at the people, the comment I was reading was like, look at the sectarian issues. How are people going to agree on a leader? And then also someone could be like, so one of the things I heard is, you don't have Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in our life in today. How is he going to, are you saying you have the ability, or your group has the ability to do the work as well as Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba were able to? So you hear, and there's more criticism, someone will say. So how would you begin to respond to the first claim about there's too many sectarian issues, there's too much nationalism? How is the Pakistani person going to agree on a Arab leader, or how is the Arab leader going to go agree on a Desi imam?
My first point is this: you can bring up countless obstacles and examples and pushbacks to to achieving something like that. Like you said, nationalism, regimes, whatever, non-unification, whatever it may be. You can give me a list of everything, whatever. But let me just bring it back to the point of, look, we have to understand that this state, itself, to establish something like that is a fard, it's a fard, right? Now, is it a communal fard or is it a fard line? We can talk about that. We can go into that more, but we know that that state is something that will enable us to what, implement the Sharia of Allah, right, onto this earth. So because that the Sharia of Allah is a fard, right, the Allah Sharia, in order to fully have that, fully implement that, you need something that statewide that can implement it, right? We can't just implement it individually, right? So when you understand,
I got 100%. I got that. Now,
okay, now, when you understand that's a further, right? Now let's forget about all the other obstacles that in the way. Okay, look, now you know this is something Allah wants from you. Period. Right? This is something, a part of the Sunnah, part of the Siraat. This is something Allah wants from us. Now, coming from that perspective, you kind of throw the whole, like, okay, the doubt out the window. Yes, of course. Well, can victory come from our ends? No. Can us toppling the regimes of sitting here in America or behind the screen? Not necessarily, but it's the effort you put in, and inshallah victory comes from Allah, and that's promised from Allah. That is just something you leave to Allah, and that in turn provides like you a lot of ease, a lot of easement towards that. So that's kind of my thought. That's my kind of first pushback on that argument. So if you want to add in.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take a step back a little bit, and on a high level, I think I want to just kind of say, like, delusion is something that oftentimes is actually supported by the capitalist the system that we live in, right? When they say be delusional, right? Be delusional about your goals. Be delusional about your aspirations when it comes to making a business, or anything that has to do with something that kind of benefits you in terms of the dunya specifically. Be and then even our parents and our generations that came before, they kind of pushed on us to reach the highest level of education. And not that those things are not important. Obviously, we have to push ourselves when it comes to gaining knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it seems like when it comes to delusion in terms of seeing Islam not just in our individual lives, but seeing Islam established on a societal level, on a communal level, on a nation level.
So you are saying it's delusional.
Sorry.
So you are saying that it's delusional.
No, what I'm saying is that goal is often just seen as thrown out, like whereas other goals that have to do specifically with success, as it's seen in the capitalistic or system, trying becoming a millionaire, etc., etc. Those goals are often seen as more attainable, and something that we should strive for, and it's good to strive for, right? And also, I just want to point out that a lot of these ideas of that it's delusional, we're psyop in a lot of ways. There's a lot of propaganda that's been pushed over the last 100 years against the Muslims, against a lot of colonial powers have pushed a lot of propaganda. And like the point you're mentioning, with there's so many groups, there's Shia, there's Sunni, there's all these different differences. A lot of these things were flared up. If you look at the Muslims during the Abbasids, during the Umayyads, I mean, Shia existed during that time as well, right? And there were definitely differences of opinion. However, these differences, there was always a central authority that no one actually had an issue with during these times. I mean, for the most part, obviously, we can point specific examples within history, right? So a lot of times, these differences have been stoked. These the flames of our differences have been stoked for the favor of the colonialists to divide us and to conquer us, right? So we can't fall into this trap mentally. I think this is something that that we have to be aware of. And I think the first important thing is to look into our history, first of all, and number two, look into the Sirah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and see the examples from the Sirah. Naming a few examples for when Rasulullah was was traveling with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and during this time there was actually an assassin that came to stop the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And during this time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in this story, this assassin is trying to come. He's coming. He comes with the first attempt, and to try to get closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to stop him, to assassinate him. Um, and then what happens is his camel actually kind of gets buried into the sand, and then the person comes back. The assassin comes again, and then the sand actually takes the camel, submerges it within the sand again. Third time that he's coming, and then there's this fog of sand that comes, like a wall of sand. It's described as. At that point, this assassin, his name is Soraka. Um, he basically submits, and he understands that this person, this is not just a person. This is a prophet of Allah, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually promises him the keys of Kisra. And the keys of Kisra, what are the keys of Kisra? The keys of Kisra are the bracelets of Kisra, actually, are the bracelets of the empire of Kisra, one of the strongest empires, and one of the most valuable items that anyone could ever think of. I'm trying to think of a modern day example, but it is one of those things where these are Bedouins that lived in the desert. Imagine they have the biggest, most luxurious item that you can even think of at the time, and probably even one of the most luxurious items to ever exist, to have that. Um, and we know during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, actually, when the Muslims are able to conquer Persia, um, he receives those bracelets of Kisra, right? We see that promise that Rasulullah, the prophecy that he had, come to fruition at that time. Obviously, it took years later. It didn't happen right away, right? But it did happen. Subhanallah, just one story that I want to bring up, and there's countless more to talk about. But you could say they were delusional at that time, but of course they stuck to the rope of Allah, and look at the success that they had in their lifetime.
Now, okay, great narration. I think it's something for us to take inspiration from, for sure. Now, a critic will say this was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had wahi. He had the, I guess someone might say, the support of Allah. We don't. We don't have wahi. We're not prophets. We don't have the ultimate. We're not getting direct. I guess I don't know how to say it well, but we're not getting constant messages from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala through Angel Jibril, right? So now, how would you begin to respond to a claim like that?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It's funny because people argue that, okay, we're not getting wahi, right? We're not the Prophet ﷺ, or we don't have a prophet among us. But the wahi that the Prophet ﷺ that he got is something that we still have, right? In terms of which came down, right, as from the Quran, as a hadith. And there's a hadith that promises, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a hadith that mentions that there will come a khilafah, there will come a state, and then it will turn into kingdomship, and then the lands of the Muslims will become oppressive, and whatnot. But towards the end of the hadith, the Prophet mentions that it is promised from Allah that there will return a khilafah, will return a statehood on the prophets on the footsteps of the mythology of Muhammad of the Siraat, right? So if this wahi that he, or this sunnah that hadith that he mentioned, right, that he got from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something that we still have to this day, 1400 years later. And the fact that whether he's here or not, we still have the essence of the message. We still have the promise of Allah, and that's going to be there until Yawm al-Qiyamah. I don't think anyone will argue that or push back on that. And with that, there, it's okay. Bismillah, we have the guidebook, we have the rule book. Let's move. And of course, victory belongs to Allah. It doesn't belong to me or you or anyone specifically. But it'll come, and we just have to move.
You know who narrates this hadith?
Who?
Hold on, how do I?
Hudayfa?
Hudayfa bin Yaman, yes, radiallahu anhu. It's a long hadith. It talks to the stages of governance
Yeah.
that the Muslims will go through, and the ending of it is ثم تكون خلافة منهاج النبوة. Then there will be a khilafa on the footsteps of Prophet, or on the manhaj of Prophet. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing, okay, people, yes, I think that's a great counter to someone who might say, you're delusional, you're never going to get this. Like, you have a direct uh, strong hadith evidence from Rasulullah SAW, giving you the glad tidings for something like this, giving you the glad tidings for something that so the critics might call you delusional for. So I think it's great. I wanted to go back to what Abdullah, you were mentioning about, you know as a kid here, especially growing up in the West, you're given examples of people who are the people you study, the people you study in school, the people you see on your TV. They all are telling stories of delusion. You're told, I remember the story of Michael Jordan, right? You're told Michael Jordan, he didn't make this basketball team freshman year of his high school, and then through hard work and through commitment and through whatever persistence, he was able to be arguably the best. Yeah, although I'm a LeBron fan, the best basketball player ever, right? Um, and things like the moon landing. You were told. I'm not here to argue, Hollywood moon landings or anything, but
Conspiracy theory.
but you're giving these stories of you're the first man to land on the moon, and um, and different barriers that humanity is quote unquote breaking, and people who were delusional to think that they would accomplish that. And I thought you got a great point that as Muslims and as an ummah and as people working towards revival of Islam, you're told, or you're given this negative impression or negative attitude towards calling for something like this. And I almost get upset at this, because just because you can't see it, or you can't dream that big, or you can't and you might mentally feel some limitation towards it, don't put the ummah down. Don't put people who are working for something that might be out of your capability, it might be out of your efforts, it might be out of the sacrifices you're willing to make. Don't put people who are working for this and call them delusional. I think you might hear the discontent in my voice, and I'm sure you guys feel it too, where someone gives you this sort of attitude, right? And I was going to say one more thing was um, I forgot what I was going to say, but what do you guys think about the take I'm taking?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because like you mentioned, if someone is doing something that let's say you don't have the capability, or you feel like you don't have the capability of doing, why would you why would you kind of bag on them, or say like, why are you doing this, what's wrong with you, right? And I think we can break that down more from like a psychological perspective, and I definitely have more to say from that perspective. But I think that this goes back to a lot of like like our past has been really severed from us. I think people have not been connected to our past, and I think over the past 5-6 years, I've been really looking into Islamic history, and just kind of getting an understanding of that past that's been kind of dormant within us. I mean, that the ideas of Islam being more than something that has the five, growing up, if you did the five, if you hit the five pillars of Islam, like you're set, right? Like you can, once you hit those, you don't have to do anything else. You can just drink chai, become an old become like a biryani uncle that just goes to the masjid, and that's it. You're done, right? But does this fit the caricature of the Sahaba? Does this fit the caricature of the people that we look up to? They didn't stop. They were in their 50s. If you look at Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, he opened the doors of Syria. He opened the doors of Jerusalem, and he continued on, and he wanted to achieve martyrdom. This idea of martyrdom, and I think now we can see a lot more with. We see martyrs on our phones now all the time in Gaza and different places, right? So there's the idea of martyrdom, dying for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is one of the highest achievements that someone can have, is something that the Sahaba knew, like they wanted, and even then some of them didn't receive it, like Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu. He even then he had so many scars on his body at the time of his death, but he was a sword of Allah. Of course, he could not fall. But these were just humans at the end of the day, and I think we sometimes limit ourselves. But I think, looking at this, looking at the history, we can sort of expand ourselves to understand that right now we see ourselves in a more of a humiliated state. We are in a weakened state. We don't have a shield, right? But that doesn't always have to be the case. In our generation, maybe that's the case. In the next generation, it might not. It might not. And of course, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the one that can change hearts and change the state of the ummah rapidly. It doesn't have to be, within a generation. It can be less than a generation. Allahu alam, right?
Or more. You don't know.
Or more. It could be It could be 100 years. Whatever state we're in, it doesn't like. At the end of the day, just because like I think Zad mentioned earlier, it has to be done, right? Doesn't mean we're gonna do it, but that doesn't mean you don't work for that cause, right?
Yeah, you reminded me. Sorry, Zad, if I cut you off. The couple things I want to mention. Think give the example of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. After 100 years of was it basically 100 years, right? 1099 to 1187, almost 100 years, right? And Salahuddin didn't just come out of nowhere. He had, I know you, if you study, I know we watched we talk about the lectures of the professor were Casaganja, right, from Austin.
Yeah.
And he starts his series off with, and other books and stories about Salahuddin. They start with his fathers and his uncle. Was it Northern Zengi and Shirku? I think it was. I'm forgetting some of this history, but it doesn't start with the Salahuddin al-Ayyubi doesn't come out of a vacuum. He doesn't. People like him. You don't come out of a vacuum. Sultan Abdul Hamid and the Uthmani Khulafa who conquered, who opened the doors of Constantinople in Europe.
Osman and Arturo and Osman, his son Osman, right?
100%. And they don't come out of nowhere. You have to create the conditions for it. You have to work towards it. You have to persist towards it. You have to over generations. And subhanAllah, our ummah has unfortunately been in a slumber or in a dire state for the last over 100 years. And unless that mentality changes, unfortunately, we'll be stuck here for another 100 years. And Allah doesn't support you unless you support Him. There's an ayat in the Quran, right? So a couple. That's one I mentioned. The other thing I want to mention was, people who we interact with, and then online, and I read these comments that I was mentioning earlier, who sort of have this limited vision and maybe have a pessimistic attitude towards revival. I wonder if you were in the age of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, or if you were in the age of the Sahaba, and you saw this in the state of Salahuddin. Think about the condition of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi when the Holy Land is in the hands of the Crusaders for almost 100 years. If you saw someone working towards this, you're like, dude, we're never gonna be able to do this. These guys are too strong. Ummah's disunited right now. We're never gonna get this back. Let's just accept the status quo. Let's just focus on, let me focus on my salah. Let me focus on my reading my Quran. I'm not gonna care for the affairs of the ummah. And or the other viewpoint, I don't want to discuss this too ahead now, but and they'll say the individual sins that we have collectively gathered is why we're disunited. I don't want to get to that too deep, but that you hear these criticisms. But the point I was trying to build on was, you think about what would be the critics' reaction to someone like Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. What would be the critics' reaction to Rasul's da'wah when, after 13 years or was it 10 years of da'wah in Makkah, he only had 40 companions, right, or something like that. I forget the numbers. For example, the Battle of Ahzab, comes to me when he's digging the ditch. And he strikes it once. He's like, the palaces of Yemen have been shown to me. He strikes it another time. The doors of Persia has been shown to me. But strikes another time. The doors of Rome have been shown to me. To Sham. And I wonder what these critics would have said to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Would he be like, oh, you and the Sahaba, you guys are talking big, and you're the Ahzab, the Confederates, all the tribes are surrounding you. They're gonna finish you. Imagine how similar actually of a situation we're in now, right? Where the powers have surrounded you, and you feel like the support of Allah isn't coming, and subhanAllah, that's when Allah's supports come. So So I wanted to bring up those points. I don't know if you guys have any reactions to that.
No.
Look, like I said, I don't want to criticize most people, right, on that sentiment. I think for the most part, it stems from just not knowing, right? Or, it stems from ignorance and not knowing, all the aspects of your deen, outside your 5 pillars, the 5 pillars, and outside, everything, right? um and you can't blame most people, right? If you don't know something, you don't know something, right? But that's kind of the work of, like you mentioned, like these notable Uthmani soldiers within the Uthmani Khilafah, Osman and his father, and Salahuddin an Ayyubi. These guys didn't come out in a vacuum, right? And now for us to again develop that environment, develop that setting again in the world, or in our locality, to gear towards, in Ummah, a unified Ummah that can not only take care of the Muslims, and provide solutions to every atrocity that we see, but again to the world and mankind at large. That's something we have to strive to create, right? And then only then will people like Salahuddin, like people like Uthman and his father, and whatnot, will be developed, will be born, will be there to bring change upon the ummah. And for us as as dawah carriers, we don't want to have a negative outlook too on people on the ummah, and continue to strive, and to let people know, and to spread that knowledge, to work towards something bigger.
I appreciate you saying that. And the reason I appreciate you saying that, because to be honest, it's probably not the majority consensus that I'm
Right,
right. That's it just happens to be, I guess, the loud minority, and people
Yeah.
things like this, online especially, gain traction because they'll
And,
causing the
and of
spirit.
course, it's pushed through propaganda and psyop too. Obviously from the elites of the other system, of capitalism, of communism, of whatever else, ideology that might be out there. Obviously, the systematic change, that's how it comes. A system will protect itself, from top down, and that will always be pushed, and in any time, in any era. So it's important for us to point that out, and to have to remove our rose tinted glasses, to say, to really look clearly at what's going on and who's saying what, just a deep think, right? Think deeply.
Mm-hmm. Go.
Yeah,
You want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
I think like a lot of, so like you mentioned before, there's been 100 years of a propaganda, right? 1924 was the fall of the Ottomani Khilafah after World War One, with the Sykes-Picot, France and Britain, were that they took crayons and they carved up the ummah that we see today. And because of that, we see the lasting effects of the ummah. You see Jordan, you see Lebanon, we see all these countries that surround Palestine, and they can't even support them. We see Egypt, and there's like zero way that the Muslims that are on the ground, their heart yearns for uh, a Islamic revival, because they know that Islam can only bring justice and mercy to the land. And if these countries, if these nation states took the banner of Islam, there, there would we would not be seeing the oppression um, that we see today. There wouldn't be no such thing as the pariah state of Israel that we see today. That would not even exist if the surrounding states unified. Um, but I want to ask you guys a question. There's a lot of propaganda that's occurred over the last 100 years. A lot of people might say, like, look, this is what you're calling for is right, but at the same time, we don't want to be thrown back into the 7th century, man. Like, we don't want to be. We're in a postmodern state that has technology, that has all these modern, amenities of life. What you're calling for, we're gonna be put back in the Stone Ages. Like, I guess
Who says this?
what
Who says
a lot of people who might not understand what it means for the Islamic society, because what they think of Islamic society is, just wearing a thobe and having a beard, and that's it, right? I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Again, a lot of that is probably Islam haters throwing that stuff online, right? These guys are just cavemen. Like for example, like people say, oh, it's just gonna be like the like of course the Taliban. They created the Islamic Emirate, which is not really an Islamic state from a Sherman perspective, because they're not establishing the Sharia fully. Um, but a lot of repression. They say we're going to be in a repressive society. What do you guys thoughts on that? I just want to hear from you guys.
Look, at the same notion. I'm gonna bring it up. It's a lot of people that are saying that, right? Being back in the Stone Ages or being back in the 7th century. Look, to be fair, to be honest, and this might sound a little bit blunt, but those people have no clue what Islam is, right? And what the essence of Islamic society is. And it's funny because not too long ago, a couple of years back, actually, I think during COVID, there's a very popular video that went viral from some white dude out in, I don't know, Kansas or somewhere down south, and he posted this. He was just venting, right, venting out, and he posted like, I'm fed up with this system, this postmodern state that we live in. With technology all around us, I'm fed up. Like, it's been killing my family, children. The economy is going down. We live in an up and down economic bubble. Like, this is not a long term thing we can live in as human beings, right? Obviously, we know that this postmodern state that offers everything you might want or need in this world, like that. We know the basis of that state is on the basis of harm and or I'm sorry, it's on the basis of benefit, all right, gain and non-gain, harm and benefit, for the people that have money, and whatnot, and this is proven through so many different studies that you can look at. But look, just bringing it back, once you know what Islam is and what it can offer to humanity, because it brings not only an economic state, a political state, a social system, from a source code, right? From a creator, from your creator, from my creator, to implement onto humanity, onto the state, onto people. So here's the thing: a lot of people are waking up, even non-Muslims are waking up, and drastically, and people are yearning for this, and to see that those Stone Ages comments, I think that's just hilarious. But Dave, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like you can probably tell, this comment makes me quite upset because it comes from a viewpoint that it's just an Islamophobic comment. It's not grounded in any reality. It's not grounded in any history. It's not grounded with any substantial evidence. And people might, I guess, people might turn to weird offshoot groups like Daesh and maybe Taliban and stuff, but to make those comments. But if you look at the history of Islam, it was pushing the boundaries of every single field until the fall of the Khilafah. It may be not the late stage of the Osmani Khilafah. I mean, while Europe was in the Dark Ages, you guys know this better than I do. Algebra, science, medicine, every single field Muslims are pushing. Even expeditions into the Americas, especially expeditions into East Asia. Um, literally algebra, it's al-jabr. It was the name of a scientist. That's the foundation of math here, right? Medicine, and Ibn Sina's his textbook was taught in Europe for for a very long time, until very recently. So this viewpoint that or this comment, this weird Islamophobic comment about that you're going to go back to Stone Ages. I mean, it is, think properly, use your senses, study history, know your history, and you realize how far Islam will actually pushes humanity to advance in all regards. And any people who say, go back to the Stone Ages, look at the streets of Los Angeles, right? Go to where all the homeless shelters are. Go to where people are walking literally like zombies. There's that one street in Philadelphia. It's like literally it's a zombie street. People are drugged up and they're just walking like zombies. And basically every major city in America has something like that. SubhanAllah, the other day there was a school shooting in Madison, in New York. School shootings. This is like, it's a meme on the internet with people around the world making fun of American schools, for for the amount of school shootings that happened here. I remember it was like it was like in the same report in the recent reporting of Madison, in Madison, Wisconsin, the school shooting. The reporter said something like, I forget exactly, but it was like, this is only the fourth school shooting in the state. I'm like, one is too many. Why are you talking about only the fourth school shooting? So subhanAllah, it's it's like I said, it's baseless comments. If you look at history, if you look at the way Islam pushes you to advance every single field,
Dude,
you understand what the reality is, and inshallah will be.
inshallah. And just a comment really quick, man. Look, if you have any kind of form of common sense, you know that the winners of of wars, the winners of history are the people that write the textbooks, or the people that write history. And the whole notion of well, the reason that comment is even in the heads of some people of Stone Ages, way back, just riding camels and, on horseback, blah blah blah, whatever. If Islam comes back, to the world, that is comes from the notion of one late World War One, when the Khilafah fell, the East, the Muslims were regarded as what the East, or the sick man of the East, right? And just like that, sorry,
sick man of Europe, the Uthmani Khilafah in its late
the
stages.
Uthmani Khilafah was the sick man of Europe, right? And just like that, a 1400 or 1300-year-old state that has been advancing humanity up until that point, just like that, can be switched up and be called the sick, the sick arm of humanity, the sick arm of that continent. It just goes to show, man, like, look, man, just wake up, take off your rose-tinted glasses, and look who's writing history. Look who's putting this into your head, and you kind of have to be able to cipher all of this. And the biggest thing, right? I want to go back to what Abdullah said, and I think that was a really important detail. Our past, we've been severed with our pasts. We've been severed with that 1300-year-old state, with the accomplishments of Islam, with the accomplishments of our brothers and sisters, and our fathers and mothers, right? Before us, that our ummah, the ummah Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is the one that carried all this to the world, right? Alhamdulillah, through the will of Allah, carry this, these advancements, this justice to humanity, not only to Muslims but to non-Muslims at large, right? And the fact that that's severed is something that was strategically done, and for us to kind of wake up and to look, this is from our deen, this is from our past, this is our real culture, that allows us to unify again, once again, and move forward.
New points, very good points.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is, like, if you look at even like you mentioned, there was so much advancements during the time of the Abbasids, for example, the golden age of Islam, and even before that and after that as well, we could see a lot of advancements that happened, like you mentioned, in math and in medicine, in architecture. We can see so many advancements happening in all fields of science, right? And one thing I want to note is that a lot of people this like, we understand that culture is something that will always exist, right? And it's how Islam dealt with culture. It was in the best way. If you think about it, like a lot of the cultures that became Muslim, Islam doesn't get rid of culture per se. However, what it does, it takes the best parts of culture, um, and it keeps them, that obviously are within the bounds of the Sharia. It keeps those aspects of culture, and it takes the best. So it took the best of the Greeks, the science the Greeks had. It took the best of the previous cultures, and it was a bridge, actually. The golden age of Islam, it was a bridge from the previous cultures to the current culture, to the new advancements that occurred, right? So it's very down-putting when people see Islam as uh, uh, some sort of entity that seeks to destroy advancement and culture and society, when in fact the Renaissance would not have even occurred if it wasn't for the Muslims in the Golden Age, right? It wasn't for them, right? But what I want to bring back to the point, and the central point, is that we have to understand that we have to look beyond, like Zai was saying, we have to look beyond what we see today and understand that Islam, it says, there's ayah in the Quran that mentions that, we divided you into different nations and cultures, so that you would get to know one another. I'm paraphrasing, but of course, this is the idea that Islam is meant for all cultures. It's meant for all peoples. It's not specific to the Arabs or the people of the Middle East, right? We would want a world where even the America, they're majority Muslim and they want to, implement Sharia, right? Because that is the code, the code of laws, the understanding that these are from our Creator. Us as humans, we logically cannot even think about what's best for us on a day-to-day basis. Think about it on a societal basis, right? On a basis of what's right and what's wrong, right? Essentially, what's halal and haram. Um, and that's what Islam is. That's what Islamic unity means. And there's more examples to bring up via history, but
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair, Abdullah. Now, okay, I know we're cutting close on time, so I want to bring this to a close. Now, if I wanted to, if I say, if I want to help those around me, those in my community who may be, quote unquote critics of your work and your vision, what would you suggest are the steps I take in order to, I guess, for me to not think that this vision is delusional. I know you sort of was been mentioning about our history severed. So what are those steps you guys think I should be taking?
Look, I think it's just speaking to everyone on a very basic level, and it doesn't have to specify to Muslims exactly. It can be non-Muslims as well, but it just speak on the notes of, hey, look, do you want to see justice, in your life, in the world, and things could happen to you. I mean, you see around you, you see your healthcare, industry, you see, education, you see, these school shootings, whatever it may be, you see everything, court cases, whatever. For me and you, I want to ensure there's justice in the world, and speak on these notes because who's gonna deny uh, living the best quality of life that you can, really. And we know Islamically, we know in our deen that the best quality of life obviously is pertaining to being adhering to Allah and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? As we are his creation, as we are his slaves, and through submitting to him do we then achieve true freedom.
No,
uh
sorry. I think you misunderstood my question. My question is, like you're saying, okay, give them like the uh understanding that this is what Islam is, sure, but but the brother can still think it's still delusional for me to like aim for this. Like this is never gonna happen. What are you talking about? So, like for example, I was thinking, okay, number one, and I don't have this list, thought in my head, but I was thinking number one, okay, if we're severed from our history, let's unsever us from our history, or let's connect us back to our history. So number one, I guess, uh, educate yourself on what the history, what your Islamic history, not just mine, but yours and yours and the Ummah's history at large was. Um, so okay, I understand that. Number two, I guess I could say, understand the requirements that are understand the obligations that are required of you. Um, and like for example, we talked about the Sirah, we talked about the steps that the Sahaba took. We talked about the steps. I guess yeah, the Sahaba took. I was going to say Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, but he's not the example. We take the example from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba that they followed, right? Um, and then number three, understand that you might always think it's delusional, but at the end of the day, it's still required of you. It's still an obligation for you, and it's still you're not. And Allah Subhanahu wa Taala does not judge you on the outcome. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala will judge you on your efforts. That's what you're held accountable on. So I don't know if you guys would add or subtract to this list, but these are just in my head as I'm talking through it. If someone were to, um, call me, hey, you're delusional for thinking about this. Those are the three things I think I would consider discussing with that brother. What do you guys think?
yeah, to add on to that, I definitely agree. Reconnecting with our history, reconnecting with the Sirah specifically is extremely important. I think that's a foundation that it gives us again a pride, right, for our deen, and our deen is not just A lot of times growing up, we just kind of were focused on those 5 pillars, right? It's far beyond. It's expansive, and the Deen is meant to encompass all aspects of our life, right? We're told even from the smallest ways of how to use the washroom, right? And how to what to say before eating food, right? And Islam also encompasses how to even run a society. And the second point that I would add is to connect ourselves with the Quran. There's many examples of the previous prophets, right, that were ridiculed. If you look at the example of Noah alayhi salam, Nuh alayhi salam, we see how the people of society, the elites of society, would ridicule him. They would say, "Look, what are you doing? Why are you working on this? You're a madman, right? You like, what is this that you're working on? Why are you calling us to this? Look at the people that are following you." Like they would say, even look at the people that are following you. They're from the miskeen, from the poor of the society, right? And look at us. We have money, right? So obviously, we know as Muslims that having money does not equate to being guided, right? So we have to kind of understand this concept that just because today we see that some of the most corrupt people have all the money, have all the resources, have all the weapons, uh, it doesn't mean that they're being given any blessing, or it doesn't mean that their time is not coming, right? This is mentioned in the Quran as well, so several times that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let people continue their crimes, um, just so they have in the day of judgment, they're thrown in the deepest depths of the hellfire, right? And we have to understand that society. The third point I would add, right, is that society and individual actions are linked, and we can't think from an individualistic lens. So what I would remind myself and remind others of is that sure, I can try being the best Muslim I can, right? At the end of the day, the people around me, uh, that's the first circle that's gonna help me stay on the right path. After that, it's gonna be my community. After that, it's gonna be my society, right? So one story that really comes to my mind when I think of this is the example of there was a story of someone who would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night, and he would worship Allah to the extent that he would be in prayer all night, and he would kind of make sure that his individual actions were taken care of completely, right? However, the society around him was a society that was had no fear of Allah, that was transgressing the bounds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set forth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down the angels to punish the society, to destroy the society. And the angels are ordered to go first to to the individual who's the pious individual, the believer. And they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't this someone that believes in you, that worships you? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the angels to destroy him first, right? And the reason being is because he wasn't spreading that message. He wasn't trying to spread that message to society and those around him. And that's something that's very scary. It's a very scary, but it's a very telling story that we're not just individual islands, but we're a society that our individual and collective actions, they have consequences, and we have to make sure that we're trying to spread this mercy, this rahmah, to those around us.
Yeah, no, Abdullah, very. I think the insight about Nuh alayhi salam that you reminded me, I think is great, because subhanallah, this is a story of the prophets. This is the work of the prophets. They were persisting for Nuh alayhi salam 950 years. Subhanallah, we're here for 20 years and the da'wah for 5 years, and then someone calls us. Some critiques us, and now we get a little upset about it. Subhanallah, they facing that for 950 years. Can you imagine? These are the greatest examples. I think when he was building building the ark, well, people are saying, "What are you building an ark for on the middle of land?" So being called delusional is I don't know if I should say this, but it's like the sunnah of the prophets, right? They were called.
Yeah, no. I'd say, I mean, screw delusional. It's ambitious. Being ambitious, and that's something that's a sunnah of the Sahaba, the sunnah of the Prophet, of all the prophets. You have to be ambitious. If you're a Muslim, you're not ambitious. What are you doing? Get your act together. But yeah, go ahead. Atif, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think this point about ambition is very good, because I was listening to what's his name, Muhammad Habdus, and he was like, you guys know Muhammad Habdus, right? The Australian sheikh. I think, yeah, right? I go, yeah. So he was like, he was mentioning like you don't want to be settled with the first level of Jannah. You should strive for the seventh level. Strive, be ambitious. Compete for good. Have these aspirations of I want to be with the prophets, with the shuhada, with the salihin, right? And compete for good. And as I had mentioned, be ambitious about the next life. Um, and what's required of you in this life. So I think those are great points. I was also going to mention. So I was making this list, right, of like things I want to, things I would, steps I would take to help someone understand. This is not delusion. I think what I would add to that, as Zahid said, part of being a Muslim is having these ambitions. So great. And then the other thing I was going to add was what something I think Abdullah mentioned earlier is you know these were the mentality that you have in the severing off of history and the sort of shackles you're put in. These were done intentionally. These were done through a concerted effort of disconnecting the ummah from its history, from its roots. And um and uh and once you understand that these were concerted efforts done, of disconnecting you from your history, you're able to then more easily break out of that shell, break out of that bubble, break out of that restriction that you've been put in. So I think those are, I guess, five things I would walk through someone with someone who wants to point out my quote unquote delusion.
Mhm.
Mm, you know,
Beautifully
any
put.
mm. What's up?
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jazakallah.
Yeah. Just one little anecdote is. I remember I was around mashallah, a very knowledgeable person, a sheikh, and there was a student that asked, when will Islam be, established like in a unified way and established as a society. And he mentioned, this is not a question for us to. Of course, it's in the hands of Allah. That was the basic response. But he said, what I want you to imagine is what kind of society do you want it to be. You want it? Do you envision that? Do you envision that it's going to have the top medicine, the top sciences, the top technology, the top universities, right? These are things that you should continually imagine, should continue to think about, because again, that's a part of our history, but that can also be a part of our future, and it takes people like us to imagine that.
Mm, this reminded me, and I guess I should have brought this earlier, but but delusion, I would consider someone delusional if someone who says all the same things that I'm proclaiming, but then sits on his butt and does nothing.
Hmm.
That is delusion. To expect something without any action taken. I
Hmm.
would consider that delusion. A delusion would be, I have a test tomorrow, and I'm not going to study for it and expect myself to get a good grade.
Hmm.
That's delusion. I'm gonna I'm trying to run a marathon, right? And I'd be like, if I did no training for it and then go out there this weekend, or go out there whenever it's scheduled, and run a 3 hour marathon, that's delusion. That's delusion. um so someone who's not putting in any of the work, especially for something like this where we study the life of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, extract the method that we need to, or derive the method, not me but the mujtahid, and follow that method in achieving this fard, that's exactly what we should be doing. That's not delusion. For someone who sits there and expects an outcome to arise out of nowhere, like we discussed the small examples of a test and these fitness goals, that's delusion. So I guess I should have definitely brought that earlier, but I don't know. What do you guys agree with me, or disagree?
Yeah, it's a lifelong effort, like you mentioned, and it takes work. And oftentimes, we hear about tasqiyat al-nafs, purification of the heart, and all these things are, of course, that those are things that the individual can work on, no doubt about it, right?
It should 100% work on.
100%, and we understand, but that's a lifelong effort. You're never going to reach perfection, but you have to work towards that. In the same way, even though you might not reach, you might not live to see, Islam established, doesn't mean you're not working for that. Doesn't mean you don't continually work for that, right? It's not something, and that's something that we understand, that the idea of perfection is a delusion, because we can't never be perfect. But we always say, try getting closer to perfection, as if that's not delusional. But we understand that that's an ambitious goal, um, that we need to have, and that we still work towards, like we still work for, the establishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules and mercy on the earth.
Well said, well said. Is that any last points? Otherwise, I think I want to.
I think you put it perfectly. On the dot. And the biggest, I think, step number one, biggest thing is connecting yourself back to the Sira, connecting yourself back to the source code. And look, man, once you look at the Sira and with that perspective, it completely changes your mind. And I'm saying that from my own experience, right? Because you grow up, going to class, talking with your friends, stories of the Sahaba, stories of Muhammad, stories of other prophets. But when you actually sit down and read the Sira or listen to the Sira, and I can recommend some books or some podcasts too, that person got a lot of benefit from. And with that perspective in mind, look, oh my God, Islam is something I have to carry to the world. Um, Man, your life changes. It's like your thoughts, your mind completely changes. And that severs that connection that was previously severed. It becomes reconnects back again. So I think that's definitely one of the most important things anyone can do, especially in the beginning, but again throughout your life, constantly looking back and learning from that.
Yeah, Jazakallah about that. So, I think let's bring this to a close. I think leave it on the point you just mentioned was number one, connect and read and understand the seerah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as he is the greatest example for us, and his life outlines the steps we need to take to strive for Al Jannah, as that is Al Firdaus, as that is our ultimate goal. Of this life, and that is the test we're given. So, Jazakallah khair, two brothers, slave of Allah, Abdullah, and brother Zahid, the ascetic. I know you cut your name out this week. And I want to bring it to a close to the audience. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me make sure I do this correctly. Like and subscribe, share with your friends and family. You got this banner going here. Alhamdulillah, we hope to have more episodes soon. We have Syria Part 2 episode coming out soon, inshallah. I don't want to say too much, but stay on the lookout. And with that being said, I want to bring it to a close. وآخر دعوان الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.